My name is James Deitch, and it is 27 April 2023. I am here at Sun-Pac Manufacturing with Gary and Teresa Henderson in Tampa, Florida, and we are conducting a oral history of this business that was founded in 2000. Welcome, Gary and Teresa Henderson. Thank you for being with us today. I'm going to go ahead and go in and launch the questions here in a minute, but is there anything that you would like to introduce about your company before we get started with the questions that you'd like your viewers to know?
Well, Jim, I definitely want to thank you for coming out and visiting with us today and taking some interest in learning about our business. What we do here is, for a lot of people, they have a perception as to what manufacturing is like until they actually come into the property and they see what we do and they see how it's done and they think, wow, I didn't realize products were made in the way that hands-on, somebody's actually making these right here, in our own backyard. So hopefully today we can, now that you've seen it, we can talk about it more in depth about what we do as a company.
Yeah.
I do appreciate you coming out today and seeing what we do, learning about our business.
That's a great perspective. We all go into the store and buy a carton of milk or a container of cream cheese, and we don't think about where it comes from. It's just there on the shelf. And so today we'll tell the story of how that bottle came to be. And I also want to make sure that your website reflects how process and total quality management control you have over the business. So we don't want any of that to get lost. That is a story of entrepreneurship and business in itself. That's a rather recent event in the industrialization of our country, and something that I picked up on your website becomes very clear in your business. So we'll get an opportunity to talk about that. So let's launch into the questions. I've got 27 questions today. We might find that there's some more that we want to talk about in addition to that. I'll let you guide that. But to start off with, you talk to us a little bit about yourself and your background and what your employees and your customers should know. It's kind of a dual question, but how do you want to be perceived, and what are you known for?
Well, I think I'll jump in on that, and
could
you
take the
can
lead on that.
certainly add to it as needed. So, so a little bit about my background. So early on, certainly well before Sun-Pac Manufacturing, I considered myself really non-conforming in a lot of ways in terms of how somebody would go about a typical corporate type cookie cutter lifestyle workplace, or they would fit in that type of workplace. And that just never was something for me. I knew that that I really went against the grain a lot of times in the way I did something, or I developed something. And so I think that's important, because here now today, so many years later, it's pretty obvious that when a client will come to us, and some others have told him, other co-packers have said, we can't do that. I think that personality, that characteristic early on shows today, and that being going against the grain, doing things that other people may not be willing to do. From a non-conforming standpoint, essentially, it's what our clients want, and it's that characteristic early on that shines its my path through this business on a regular basis to our customers, and they learn that in dealing with us. They learn that we are here to operate unlike how others may operate, or how traditionally other co-packers might operate. We're truly here for the client, and that's something I like them to know. I think they learn that when they work with us in a short period of time.
And for me, it's actually a lot different, because I'm kind of the accidental entrepreneur. And I think the things that the places I worked and the ways I was molded early on through those experiences were all training for me to become the entrepreneur that I didn't know I could be. So it's for me, coming here and joining Gary was a leap of faith, and in a very short period of time, I really started to understand and grasp that what we did helped people. Being here and being an employer in Tampa and bringing the people here that experienced or not experienced, that we were here to help them be the best they could be. We were going to give them the tools to learn and become an essential part of our business. And I think, our employees that are here can attest to that. We have employees that have been here going on almost 14 years now, and some of them started sweeping floors. We put them on a machine and they excelled at that. And we trained them on the understanding of that machine. And then we trained them in the ways of our business, our operating procedures, the mandates through compliance and certifications. And so kind of sit back now and really feel like we've built something from the ground up. And for me, especially coming in, we were quite small when I joined Gary. He was still building, he was still growing. So to join a business that had only 12 employees and now have a business that has over 100 employees, and it's changed, from that point A to point B. I joined the company in 2005, and we've watched it, grow and shrink, to now it's a stable organization that is, its focus is to be, remain stable but continue to grow. And our employees, I think, should know that we always have their backs. We are here for them. We are a people company first and foremost. Everything we do, we think about our employee. How will this affect them? Does it make sense to grow at this point? Does it make sense to take on this business? Can they uphold what we need them to uphold, or should we sit back a little and wait for more sturdy ground, so to speak? And you may learn about what that is later as we
Sure.
move through some of your questions.
Okay. So, Gary, this is more for you since, Teresa, you joined the company 5 years after it started. So what was the path that led you to start Sun-Pac? Well, you certainly had other experiences before you started the company. So tell us about how you arrived there and how you started.
So, it's Sun-Pac is one attempt, one effort that's successful today, that's really founded on a number of failures in terms of your typical entrepreneurship efforts of trying something, putting together an idea, thinking to yourself, this is what I want to do. I don't want to do what other people are doing, so I want to do my own thing. And so there's a series of thoughts of, okay, I can, everywhere you turn, can I make a business of that? Can I make a living of doing that? And I hadn't gotten to that point yet with Sun-Pac. I had a background working in somewhat of a corporate environment, working for a very large long distance company for a couple of years, and that company was able to gain the knowledge and training of developing relationships. It's something I already had. I think I'm very much a people person in many ways. During normal business hours, I think after business hours, when I get home, then I'm home. And I think a big part of that is because the number of people that on a daily basis we interact with. So we need a little bit of time out. We take that time out. If you know us outside of this facility, then that's who we are. But the point is, in that corporate environment, when I worked for that much larger telecommunications company, they taught me the way to develop relationships with large businesses, much bigger than larger businesses than what we are today. In fact, the category that I called on was the Fortune 1000 businesses, and part of Fortune 500 a lot of people have. So the next bracket is Fortune 1000, and then it goes up the scale. So I got good training on how to develop relationships. It wasn't really selling as such. We were developing relationships with companies that needed the service that we offered. And so I was that liaison that helped integrate the products that we offered, company sold, to the internal working systems, the IT portion of whatever that company was that I called on, whoever it was. And there were some large names back then. Point is, when I got into this business, when I got into the dietary supplement industry, that's something I recognized was missing, and that is relationship building side. I always thought that if you simply, can manage accounts like I learned working for the larger company, you could maintain residual business with that customer, right? They'd continue to buy. So there wouldn't be a need to go out there and bring in new customers, constantly calling, trying to develop new relationships. And what you were doing is you were developing new products for the same customers. And I knew that there would be an opportunity if you could do that. So that was one component of starting Sun-Pac. The other part of it, and other companies weren't doing that. A lot of the companies that were in the industry, the one that I worked for when I first was introduced, simply didn't care whether we took another order or not. They wanted that next order, and they wanted a new order from another customer. And if the customer reordered, well, that was great, but that's not really what their interest was. Their interest was new clients and new orders. And I just didn't think it needed to be done that way. So that was essentially one element. The other thing I noticed was that companies, they didn't have structure in this industry. They didn't have this type of structure or the discipline to, deliver product on time. It wasn't as important. And so, when you look back at the training that I learned about building relationships, a big part of that was goal setting, creating discipline, meeting deadlines, and that's really all this industry was missing. There was a gap that I saw that needed to be filled. And so, in conjunction with delivering on time and giving customers what they wanted, along with maintaining the account, and I felt there was a fit there with Sun-Pac. So on the coattails of a number of failures, really for me personally, and I talk about that, quite passionately. At the time, I lost a very good friendship of mine, somebody I trusted. I was in the middle of that. I had lost my job at the time, and I lost. I was in the middle of a divorce, and I thought I was going to lose my kids, quite honestly, and that's real for me. And some people have heard that story. I've talked about it. I think, Teresa, once in a while you sit and you listen to it and you go, well, that's a little more you've added to that I didn't realize was going on. But those failures, the only thing that was good for me was this company, right? This new founded business. It really, at that time, was the only thing I could turn to that was really, good for me. And it wasn't much. The business was, there was just, the thought was, I need to do something. I got to push away from the negativity that's associated with all those other things that were going on for me, which were very difficult and depressing in many ways. And what was good was, and it wasn't much, was this new company. So I turned my focus to Sun-Pac, and I said, I'm going to take all those things that I've learned, characteristics that I already possessed, which related to time management and goal setting, and start a company. And that's really how Sun-Pac started. That's really it. I truly look back on it today and think to myself, what little bit I had, I was too foolish to know I could potentially lose it. And it wasn't much. I thought I'd already lost it all. But really, there was more to lose, but I didn't let that get in my way. And that's how Sun-Pac got started. And I got started. I got working.
Well, that's a great story. And I had the opportunity in my prep to look at the video that you did for your employees, and you shared a little bit more on that same story today. And I know that was an emotional day for you. But I would say that, number one, my impression is that's a lot of courage to take adversity and find good. And that's the American story. That's the entrepreneurial story. And that's the purpose of an oral history, is not to talk about, oh, we make this product and this is how much it costs and this is our demographic is. It's what got you through, what made that. what's special about it. And that comes through in your website. It comes through in what I was privy to see of what you told your employees and is out there on LinkedIn. And that kind of takes care of the next question in there. You answered what was the need in the industry, and just to put a fine point on that. The differentiation from the competition primarily came from not having metrics, not having existing metrics because perhaps the industry was too new for you to benchmark against. So you identified that as missing and you launched through. So that kind of it does answer the third question there is what was missing, what was the need, what was your unique selling proposition that you could go in and fill. So that's some great stuff there. Tell us a little bit, Teresa. We were chatting offline, and you had some great insight as to really important for this discussion about the history of the industry. What prompted it even to become an industry, and I found that fascinating. So if you could share that a little bit.
Yeah, I think what we talked about was some trepidation in actually going into the whole history, because I couldn't really say, I know everything, from soup to nuts, how it began. But I can tell you that the beginning of vitamins or vitamin products was really because it's identifying the nutrients in foods. So in the early 1900s, even well-to-do families that were had the ability to have an abundance of good food, quality food, but food that was at the time being processed, such as polished rice and husked wheats and other foods that were actually being stripped of these essential nutrients. So they used those studies. They actually used the wealthier population to understand what was missing, from their diets, that everybody else was also missing, that we had so many unwell people in the United States, and what they could do. So from what I understood, there were some doctors that started to study those missing nutrients. We knew we had carbohydrates and proteins and fats back then, but what else was it that made up a food that could help a person feel well or could make a person ill if it wasn't in there? So that's my understanding of how vitamin, or the word vitamin, came about. But my true understanding of this industry really begins when I step foot into the role of assisting Gary and growing the business in 2005, where it morphed from there, and where we are now with the understanding of supplements and dietary nutrients and superfoods is completely different. I mean, in the 20 years I've been in this business, I've watched it morph and change exponentially. It's amazing what we understand about food and its role in being supplemental, and the supplements in being supplemental to what our bodies need to be the best that they can be is astronomical to me. And I think most people would agree that our recognition of supplements today is much different than our recognition of supplements 25 years ago.
Yeah, food for sustenance instead of food for pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Very true.
Excellent. What would you describe as the most critical developments that you've seen in the industry? You referred to how it's evolved. What would you qualify as some of the most critical developments that have been good, bad, impressionable?
For me, really seeing that supplements and nutrients have truly taken the place of some, not all, but some pharmaceutical needs. So, for instance, there have been a lot of studies, from what I understand, for diabetics. Diabetics 20 years ago were wholly reliant on insulin. where now they're finding there are new supplements. There are things out there that diabetics can begin to take and supplement where they're not as reliant on those pharmaceuticals. So the whole diet, exercise, and supplements have all started to merge as um, I guess, a mantra for most people. They don't want to be reliant on pharmaceuticals. They don't want to get to a point where they have to rely on that. So now supplements have become the preventative measure. If I start taking these things now and doing these things now and treating my body as well as I can now, I won't later need those pharmaceutical treatments.
Okay. Excellent. How do you research and validate your ideas? When you started the company, and you started thinking about, what's the product going to be? What am I going to put out there? You talked a little bit about the needs and how it evolved, and how did you research and create the products? What was your first product?
Yeah, validation. Validating the ideas comes often as a surprise, by the way. And it started early on. In fact, with some of those first products, the first product that Sun-Pac, in fact, invoiced was was really a hand assembled product. It was a little tiny bottle that contained a nail polish that was pre-mixed, a pre-mixed blend, and I labeled the front and labeled the back of the bottle. It had two labels, and filled it, capped it, packaged it in a regular point of sale type box as the printing go on a display shelf. And the validation for that product came when somebody paid me to do it. I really think that simplifies the validation. And so for me, it's an aha moment. It was to say, maybe I've got something. Maybe I've got something here. I said I was going to do it. I said I was going to start this company. I said if I could just deliver it. Here's a customer that could not get their product put together because they were really too small for a lot of the contract manufacturers out there that had these enormous, minimum quantities that they required. And for me,
and I think that's what we failed to mention, was that we are contract manufacturers, so people bring us their ideas and their products. We don't have our own product that we try to sell to an end consumer. Mm-hmm. So these are people that are ready to pull the trigger on their own marketing and put a product out there. So they come to us and say, this is what I'd like. Can you build it?
And with that being said, so when we talk about, the validation portion of it, it's frequent. It's every time a client brings us something, and we look at it as, well, in many cases, nobody's ever done it before. It's an idea, it's a concept. Can you do it? And it all relates back to, well, sure, we can do it. If you need it, we'll figure out a way to make it happen. And once we do, we deliver the product, again, it's a reassurance that what we're here doing is needed. It's a service that's needed. And a big part of that is really just giving it to them on time, delivering that product to the clients on time. A problem that they had, and with other contract manufacturers, larger ones, and quite frankly, we've learned to control that, because we see some of the same struggles that those companies were when we were smaller and they were large. Well, now we're a larger company, and we have 120 something employees, and we face the same challenges in terms of delivering to that same client. The difference is, we've got a finger on our business. We still know what the clients need. We understand that, and we're physically here on a day-to-day basis making sure that happens. Go through the facility, and I talk to a potential client, or I bring somebody through for the first time. It's not a rehearsed, tour that we give them. It's not a speech that we learn. I go through it as I've learned it, and I know the business. I know what the equipment does. I know what the yields are. I know how to run a lot of those machines, and for that reason, we continue to see orders from clients, and we continue to validate the service that we offer, and it's something that's definitely needed.
Yeah. So one of the things that I said early on that I picked up from your story that you have on your website is that you're very focused on process and quality. Now we're going to talk about domestic and exports, imports here in a second. One of the things that occurred to me as you were talking that I want to make sure we don't miss is that a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs look at a product and they look to China as a cheap manufacturer of product. And certainly in the United States, there's all opportunities to get any number of different products from overseas. You actually have a domestic client who's able to find a domestic manufacturer that has a more controlled process because it's government regulated. We talked a little bit about Europe earlier, so why don't you tell us a little bit about the difference between the domestic and the import export? Because Teresa was sharing with me some ideas that I had not even thought about when it comes to that.
So, the industry very early on, as Teresa mentioned, was a unregulated industry. It was more of a wild, wild west, so to speak. I mean, that's the words that were used to describe the U.S. market, dietary supplements. Take them at your own risk. You never know what you're getting. And so, as the demand and the need for alternative medicines became, popular and apparent, the government stepped in and started creating regulations. Right? They started creating a code of federal regulations around surrounding dietary supplements. The first thing they did in the industry is recognize a dietary supplement. That took place in 1995, I believe. And so they created this Deitch Act, which is we'll need to look up the abbreviation, but it's the okay. So we think dietary, so it's Deitch, so it's Supplement Health Act, right? So it's a Dietary Supplement Health Act, I believe is what Deitch stands for. Yes, and that was started in '94. So that gave a definition to dietary supplements. And now it became recognized, and then in 2009. The FDA created the regulatory codes, which determined how products would be manufactured through good contract manufacturing processes, how you would create, the standards of quality, potency, accuracy of the label, the quality of the product improved. And so that was domestic. That was here in the United States. Not all countries are where we are today, here in the United States in terms of how they handle their supplements. In fact, most of the countries are still way pre the 1995 Deitch Act. In fact, it's really still, take them if you think you need them or if you trust them, because we really don't know what companies are producing or blending or making, and that's what happens in a lot of the other countries. Many other countries look to the U.S. market to source their finished dietary supplement. Now, the raw material may not necessarily be a domestic raw material. It may have come from another country. But the point is, it doesn't make its way into a finished product in the United States without being tested to confirm it is what it's supposed to be. So essentially, if it weren't what it's supposed to be, the product would never make it into a finished product in America, and that's important. So the domestic market is really, in many ways, parallel to what we take from a pharmaceutical perspective in terms of the testing and the conformancy of the product and the sanitization process of how the products are made. Whereas that's not always the case in other countries.
Excellent. So we've talked about how government regulations impacted the industry historically, and a little bit of the evolution of the regulation. Is there any cultural relationships between your product and consumers? There's a lot of Eastern medicine. We know about the ancient history of not really supplements, but organic materials that come from the Far East. We know about the old medicine shows that occurred in the early 17th, 18th century in the country. Is there any cultural things that you see, or is it strictly more of an American need for supplements? And if there's not, that's fine.
I can't say that the market trends follow a cultural trend. I mean, there are some, I guess, some things that are identified that are being used regularly in another country that the US gets a hold of and takes a study and says, you know what, there is some truth to what this ingredient can do for, you know, for someone, whether it's something for the, you know, for kidney health or liver health or lung health, or, you know, so there are some things that maybe other cultures, for them it's an everyday item or ingredient that is infused to maybe a tea or food product, that the US gets a hold of and says, you know, this would make a great dietary supplement for people that have a particular ailment or something that they can focus on and say, this is going to help that individual. Because not every item or ingredient is an item that you could say everybody needs to take. It's really drills down to what the particular consumer need is, per individual. You know, some people, you know, need to be taking more collagen in their diet, so they're going to gravitate to a collagen product. Some people need to be, you know, boost their vitamin C, right? That, you know, some people just feel that, you know, if they take that vitamin C every day, for them it's something that is ideal for them. But in other countries, vitamin C deficiency may not be a thing. You know, there may be something they have in their everyday diet that there is a need for vitamin C. So, you know, I think for here in the U.S., it's more science driven than anything. It's not as much, you know, well, they're doing this over there, so, you know, in Italy, you know, they're drinking wine every day, so, you know, we should be doing that here too, because they have a lower, you know, vascular health issue over there, you know. So there are things that
But to be clear, you don't sell wine.
no, we do
Okay.
not sell wine. We don't manufacture wine. But it's interesting though, because there are some things, because wine comes from grape, and in the grape they've identified resveratrol as something that people can add as a dietary supplement, as a beneficial overall antioxidant cardiovascular health type item. So yeah, there's some things that are drilled down from certain cultural health initiatives that products are made from, you know, that the US kind of turns into a trend that says, hey, this is a great health benefit. I probably went off course there, but
No, that's good. And so would you characterize the vast majority, if not all of the products that go in the raw materials as organic, natural materials?
Botanical, yes. Organic, you don't want to say, you couldn't say everything's organic, because there's an organic stamp that goes on things that are sold or driven as organic. It's how they're grown, how they're treated, how they're processed. Right. But from grassroots botanicals and supplements, yes.
I think I was probably using that word improperly, organic, but I meant natural materials.
Yes, naturals, botanicals, absolutely.
Created by God.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Your website, I talked about that a little bit in the beginning. Your mission statement, your vision seems to really focus on manufacturing processes and quality. Tell us a little bit about your philosophy on that and why that's important to the business and the industry. You talked about recognizing there was a lack of metrics, and what stands out in, if anyone from the public looks in, you zero in on process and quality more than anything else. That's your story on your website.
Again, you know, the industry is developing in terms of who's making the products, who's doing the manufacturing. Just about anybody can market a product. Still, there isn't a requirement to get an approval to, you know, to develop a label and take a product and launch it and market it. And I think with some of the e-commerce today, they've simplified that matter for a lot of people. You know, you really don't even need to leave your house, and you can be, you know, you can have a product, you know, worldwide being sold, you know, out of your living room without really a lot of effort. So, you know, what makes that product, you know, what qualifies that product to be, consumed safely by other, if it's sold domestically, certainly other Americans, right? Or anybody for that matter that buys the product. And it's the manufacturing process. It's who's making the product. Is this, who's behind the company? Is it, what is the culture of the facility? And that's what not every client has an opportunity to travel to see the facility, fly out here to Florida, and get an opportunity to see what we have to offer, which is a lot. We have a very nice, clean, organized, process-driven through SOPs and regulatory testing. We have a very nice facility, and that's what we try to show clients when they're looking at choosing Sun-Pac as being their preferred partner, their vendor. Our product is the quality of the service that we offer. The product that's in the bottle changes and varies depending on who wants to make what. And a lot of times that's driven by activities that are going on around the world. Like, for instance, this pandemic we've just gotten through. That drove the need for people to be taking products that are immune system driven. So, we wanted to present ourselves as, the manufacturer. You're talking about immune systems, and you're talking about safety and products and maintaining a clean, healthy, lifestyle, prevent other, maybe catching something. You don't want to catch something from the facility that's making the product. So we've got to be able to show that we're doing things internally, and that's what you see on the website. You see that we're doing things internally to, maintain a very clean, consistent product that we produce for customers, and its processes are repeatable. So how we made it one time will be the same way we make it every time, and therefore at the end user sees the same product every time they order it, no matter when they order it, as long as they're buying the same product in that same brand, and we're the manufacturer. That's what they end up getting.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. To tie all that in, because my next question has to do with the external factors that impact your business. And I wasn't really thinking about COVID at the time, but if you think back, if the industry really started to evolve with processing of food in the early 1900s, remember we had a huge flu epidemic in around 1916, 17. They wiped out a good portion of the population, and yet processed foods were just coming in. People were starting to think about preserving foods, things of that nature. I hadn't really thought about COVID, but that's one of them. What would be other external factors that, whether they're regulatory or transportation, availability, raw commodities, anything that has impacted you over the history of your business?
Sure. I mean, we've seen, because some things follow trends, or there's trends out there. We've seen shortages, for certain botanicals or even flavors. Right now, raspberry seems to be a huge flavor across the board in the industry. On any store shelf, or everything is raspberry or lemonade flavor, or and if you think of the stress that the need for the raspberry flavor has put on the growers throughout the world that grow raspberries. We've been told before, all the farms, they had a bad season, or the crop didn't go well, so there's a 15-week lead time now on something that was only a 6-week lead time. So all of a sudden we have a customer that has their own customer base that's relying on that product, and that product in that flavor, that all of a sudden we're being told, well, you may not be able to manufacture it in the timeline that you initially told your customer, because now we have to wait for the new crop, or we have to wait for this other farm to come through before we can make your strawberry or raspberry flavor for your product. So there's a downline, a trickle effect of things that tend to happen. And that's for everything, not just raspberry. It could be, just, Gary, you probably have a better finger on some ingredients that we've been told all of a sudden we can't get a hold of,
Well, from internationally, many of the types of equipment, that we purchase or we use are not necessarily domestically manufactured. In fact, certainly a lot of the assembly takes place here in the United States. The core of a lot of the equipment, comes from other countries. And so with some of the challenges, some of the things that are going on in today, today's economy, especially how it relates to, bringing materials in, the safety of bringing it in through our ports, and the tie-ups from the slowdowns of checking it and confirming that it's what it's supposed to be and it's right, or even instances where we were challenged. The U.S. market is challenged with other countries, and we're not doing business with them. Tariffs get changed overnight. That can control supply chains and restrict supply chains that make, on the manufacturing end, make things very difficult. You can't get equipment, which we've run into problems with on occasion. Then you can't make product. So I think that's some of the challenges that we've seen with the industry in terms of other countries and how that can impact us here.
Yeah. So I said I wasn't going to go down bunny trails, but I can't avoid this one because it occurred to me while you were talking about raspberries that there is a growing and very significant movement towards towards ecology, towards green. Some have called it a religion in itself. But if you're dealing with organic products that are coming from overseas or even around the country, how big of a concern is climate to you? Do you have a different take on the green part of the industry than I would in what I do?
I think that probably would be something we hadn't really taken a lot of, I don't think, consideration. I think that's remote from where we are. Probably I would think on the supply side in terms of different growers and farmers, that would be obviously a real concern. It hasn't trickled all the way down to where we're at just yet. But I suspect.
So you're going to be writing that one down.
I am now.
You're writing that one down.
I've given me some homework now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly speak to the plastic bottles that are used in our industry. So we you look at store shelves now, everything is in a plastic bottle,
Yeah.
and of course that impacts our business greatly. Fuel costs impact the plastics industry, and
Right.
so all of a sudden a bottle that you were able to get for 12 cents all of a sudden shifts to 18 cents because not only does the cost to manufacture that bottle go up, the cost to get it here goes up. So there's a lot of, I guess, intrinsic factors to the pricing of our components to even assemble products for our customers that are constantly moving and shifting. If it's not the raw material, it's the plastic bottle, or it's the type of cap, or the even the paper or plastics that are used to make the labels. So during COVID, we saw a huge rise in cost and a huge shortage in certain types of bottles because of the rise in production for hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, everybody had to change their packaging because they can no longer get their hands on a typical bottle, because it's now being used to pack hand sanitizer into it. So, we saw a lot of flexibility start to happen, so where there were customers that were really tied to a particular bottle or a label structure or a cap, were starting to say, well, you know what, I just need to get my product out there to my customers, so I'll take a red bottle if you can find it. I don't care. I'll take a green cap. I'll take this size. We'll just fill it with more cotton, and so we were constantly chasing that moving and shifting of changing decisions, because the minute you go to a different bottle, now all of a sudden you may need more cotton or a new size desiccant, which helps keep the product from getting too much moisture. And so we were restructuring constantly our costing sheets and how we evaluated the cost of this product to manufacture it, to help keep it in a price range for the end consumer. So as an end consumer, we've all experienced that, the rise in cost, and nobody could really quite put their finger on why, ice cream, all of a sudden the price is higher, but you're getting less ice cream in a container. We're on the front end of recognizing why that happened. But there's a lot of people out there that don't understand why that happened, and it's because of those things, The minute you have to move or shift from one different aspect of how you're going to get your product out there on the shelf, it's that trickle down effect of all the other costs that go into changes to make that one item happen and still get it on the shelves.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot.
It is a
The
lot.
consumer would never know that.
Mhm.
So let's shift gears. Let's go into marketing and sales. You've got a different kind of client. So how has your passion and your salesmanship changed over the last 20 years? How you talked about a specific client that you're looking for, less clients, more product, as opposed to, casting that wide net. Was that an evolution in your thought process?
No, well, in the very beginning, early on, the idea was to really focus on what a client's needs were, and what, by doing that, you realize that customers, most of them, do not want to be a one product business. They want to have a brand, and to really concentrate on what that customer wanted to do, you had to focus on their brand, which limited time that you could, associate with other customers. And it happened early on. We, built with one customer 15, 20 products right out of the gate before we had two clients. We were building 20 products with one customer before we had two customers. And by the time we brought that next customer on, the same type of thing happened. We were making 10, 12, 13 products for them before we brought that third client. So that's kind of been the nature of our marketing, and getting our foot in the door with new prospects. We explain to them that our interest is in building their brand. Our interest isn't about building the competition that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and helping them necessarily once we engage in some kind of a service. And they learn that. It's it's not lip service. When we tell them that, we show true interest in their business. We develop at our cost, in many cases, new products to recommend to them to market based on industry trends. What are people what are people buying? What are we hearing that they're buying? What are they liking? What can this brand do differently than what's out there on the market that sets the product apart, and show a client, show them what they can do. Depends on what their interest is. If their interest is just making money, then the angle is just that. We have to show them that cost in relation to what their expected sales are and what they think they can market the product for, and what their gross revenue could be on a product like that. But others have other clients that have different interests, and their interest is really just how can that help somebody. I could sell some product, and I know I'll sell some product, but my interest is how do I help other people. And so that's a completely different approach with those kinds of clients. We're gonna go to them and show them just that. It's going to be a very health conscious. When you say organic, we're talking about botanicals that are grown from the ground. We are talking about natural. Well, maybe we are talking about organic. We want to know about, are there any pesticides? How about heavy metals? Other types of contaminants in the products. That customer is a completely different approach. And we have a lot of that mix in the clients that we do products for today. What we do find is that the client will trend in their brand towards one of those beliefs. So if it's driven by margin-based product, and a lot of times the quality isn't comparable with somebody that's really interested in developing products that are very healthy for consumers. I think that helps. That gives you a little bit of perspective on how we market.
It does
with our clients.
It does. So with that in mind, how has your competition evolved over the last 25 years, and how have others' failures, other companies' failures, helped you hone your unique selling proposition? And also, what I think we talked about it, but in that, what needs does your product solve for the consumer?
So this, as a contract manufacturer, we have a very interesting position when it comes to competitors. A lot of times when a company, when somebody's looking at an industry and they're talking about competition within that industry, they're talking about, this is mine and I'm doing these products, and I don't want you to do them, or I'm going to offer something, whether it's price or service or quality or whatever you believe that gives you an advantage over that other company. you're going to be presenting that to that customer, and your thoughts are is that I want it and you're not getting it. And that's really basically what happens in a competitive environment a lot of times. In our industry, interestingly enough, we have what's considered more of there's a common factor between our competition and us, and that's the client. Customer, a lot of times, will do business with both of us. They'll produce products under their brand with Sun-Pac Manufacturing, and they will offset some business with the company that's doing a lot of the same type of work that we are doing, capsules and tablets and powders, with another brand, with another company. And we find ourselves almost strategic competitors, because we're working together in some cases, and that's happened. We've gotten together, we've talked with competitors, talked about how can we, work together to give our common client the same thing. So it's very different in this industry, I would say, in how you work closely with competitors, where that didn't exist where I came from before. It was one customer, and one of us is going to get them. That's not the case here. Okay. It's usually very shared. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think for us, we've had customers that have taken business to other co-packers, and they've come back and said, we'd rather have everything with you. And we that's happened quite a bit over the years. So, sometimes, when a customer meets with us and they haven't yet begun manufacturing with us and they go somewhere else, we usually turn to one another and say it probably won't be long before they're knocking on our door, because there were promises maybe made where the other, the competition fell short. I think we've done a really good job of qualifying the customer that's coming to us, because we've had customers come to us with a huge breadth of product and say, we're so unhappy with our other manufacturer. We just, we want to bring everything to you guys. And we'll be like, don't bring us everything. Let us start with maybe 3 items. And then if we make you happy, and then we could start, looking at some of the other products, because we want to be sure too that the customers is someone that we want to be doing business with long term down the road. We don't want to just take all these products that, maybe, they don't have a lot of confidence in. We want to know that we have a customer that has a lot of confidence in their product, and that they respect their consumer as well. And that's important for us. I think one of the things we really focused on was the quality, because that was what we heard a lot, that the quality just wasn't there, from crooked labels to missing cotton in a bottle to lot numbers not being correct, things like that. So those are the kind of that feedback that we took into consideration, and we make sure our people are trained very well in all those aspects, and they respect that too. Or, our employees out there respect that. We're not focused on getting the most amount of bottles done in a day. We've gotten feedback on manufacturers that do a piece count, or they're paid on a number of bottles that they get through the line in a day. We don't do that. We would rather 500 bottles be done perfectly than 5,000 bottles get out the door, and then we find out that 4,500 of them weren't done correctly, because everybody was focused on getting the quantity out, not the quality. So yes, we do want to hit a mark, and we make money if we get things out the door quicker, but we also want it to be right the first time. We don't want to see it come back because something was missed.
What's the best advice anybody ever gave you in this business?
A name comes to mind, and a turning point in our business comes to mind for me.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with. I'm not gonna give you a name, but I'm gonna give you a position. I'm gonna say there was an FDA auditor that walked into our facility.
We're on the same page.
In 2004, and that was back prior to regulation. And at that point, 2005.
I was there a
2000.
year, 2006.
Teresa was there, and we were operating back then as best as we knew we could, meaning the place was clean. The floors were mopped and the walls were clean and the ceilings were clean. But what was missing, we didn't know that at the time, was that we didn't meet really the true requirements of what manufacturing a dietary supplement was going to be, what was going to be required in a few years. We didn't know that, and so we had this unexpected. It was more of an investigation. Who are you? The knock on the door Monday morning. FDA here to conduct an investigation. Who is Sun-Pac? What do you do? I'm like, panicked. What are you doing? What do you do? What do I do? What do I do? I don't have a consultant here. I didn't know what to do. And so I knew it was going to be a difficult couple of days, because I realized then the auditor was going to be there. He announced that he'd be there for a couple, 3 days. So I knew it was going to be difficult, but I felt we were pretty good order. And boy, was I wrong. I learned that, just as I mentioned, that the walls and the ceilings and floors were clean. Those weren't the things. That would probably be okay if we were going to be serving hot dogs and hamburgers or something like that out of a mobile kitchen or something, maybe even fast food type restaurant maybe. But in the manufacturing process of dietary supplements, the industry was already starting to look to make the change and align itself more with over-the-counter type drugs and pharmaceutical type drugs. And so we just weren't that company. And so 3 days, it was 3 days of just a real eye-opening, and I could say, verbal lashing, but I'm not going to say that because that's not what it was. It was a true learning experience for us. And I say that because we did something about it. We recognized that what was pointing out that we were deficient in, we were in control of to fix. Now, we didn't have a lot of money, but we knew there would be a cost associated. But we listened. And the first day, we got through the first day with the auditor. It was tough. But I think we were able to, meet some middle grounds right out of the gate. In fact, if you remember correctly, there was a discussion about lunch the first day, and the auditor asked if he could bring his lunch in. He said, "Can I bring my lunch in?" And of course I said, "Sure, you can bring your lunch in." We're going to be leaving anyway at 12 for lunch. He said, "No, this is a working lunch. We're working through lunch." And I thought, well, you have your lunch. And he goes, "Yeah, and I'm going to eat. We have to work through it." And I just paused for a minute. You were there, I believe. And I thought, it doesn't work that way. I said, unless you have enough sandwiches in that little bag for all of us, we're leaving. We'll be back in an hour. You can sit right there. And we had an understanding that day because he knew, I was very firm when I told him I was going to do something. And that applied when he told me I needed to do something. So that investigation throughout the next few hours really kind of built on that, coming to the table and meeting eye to eye on how we were going to move forward on that event and how we move forward over the next couple of hours and then ultimately the next couple of days. And so he knew when we said we were going to do something, because he said we needed to do it, we were going to do it. And we did it. And I think by the third day, which is during the exiting of that audit, we were told that we will need to make the change. He believed, after spending 3 full days with us, that our intentions are to make changes to meet the new regulations that are coming. And in fact, we had gotten to a point with him that he actually provided us his phone number to make contact with him at a later date to do some things if we needed advice or suggestions or recommendations. And we made a change right away, immediately after that. That meeting that day showed us early on, and we had years now that we could get the business up to speed, because he came to us so early and did that investigation and worked through it with us. Now, it probably wouldn't have gone as well as it did if he didn't realize, if he didn't believe that we were going to do just what we said we were going to do, just like we said we were going to leave that early afternoon to go to lunch, and we weren't going to stay there. And that's very unusual. I didn't know that. I've learned that later.
Yeah, it was
That's not a normal practice with the FDA. You don't do that.
it was a true turning point for us, because it was a make or break decision. These tough regulations were coming, and we were going to need to get ahead of the curve quite quickly. And it was going to be a capital investment and an investment in staff to uphold everything that we were going to need to do. And the biggest part was our production flow. The way we were going to need to establish production flow, we weren't going to be able to do in the building we were in. So it meant we were going to have to get out of the building we were in too. So very quickly we had to decide, are we going to stay ahead of the competition, or are we going to be the mom and pop that goes out of business?
Yeah.
And it was a defining point, I think, probably for a lot of companies back then. So 25 years ago, there was a lot of competition. But to get ahead of that curve, there were many of them that just couldn't do it. They just couldn't get to that point where they were going to be able to operate under CGMP standards. And we made the decision and dug in to do that. So there was good manufacturing practices, right, which everybody did. You had these good manufacturing practices, and we were doing that to a standard. And then the FDA was going to write code, and the code was going to basically mandate current good manufacturing practices. So FDA wrote a book and had the code, and they basically mandated that when they came to see you, you needed to be enforcing these practices. Then we're going to tell you how, but at the end of the day, you had to show that you had these practices in place. And so we dug in and decided we were going to keep going. We were going to try and be the company that got ahead of the curve and could show that we were a CGMP compliant facility. And it was a turning point for us. It was probably the best advice anybody could have given to us as a small business at the time that wanted to stay in business.
So the timing was fortuitous. It was a positive experience.
It really was.
It sure was. And most people don't, talk about a positive experience when it comes to dealing with the FDA. But for us, it was definitely a pivoting point for us to realize we needed to do something. We were operating at a food manufacturing, capability, and that just wasn't where the industry wanted you to be. You needed to take that next step, and we did.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we started really building. That's really when we started building.
So what's the advice that you wish somebody had given to you that you had to learn on your own, the most important one? This guy showed up and knocked on your door and gave you great advice that you needed.
We rely on a lot of people today to help run this business, and we've really learned how to properly evaluate the right candidate for the positions today, and how that plays a role in back to where we were then is that we thought we had the right consultant operating and acting with us. And if coulda, shoulda, woulda, if we would have known a little bit more about the background of who we had and what they weren't able to do, what we were sold on and thought they could do, we, in fact, quite frankly, were told that we did very well during that audit. Certainly not by the auditor or the investigator, I guess, but by our consultant. And it just showed us that he really wasn't the right person. So I wish somebody would have told me that. We didn't find that out the hard way. But to learn from that, the lesson learned was today, now, we're relying on a lot of people. That was back then, it was just one consultant. But just about every manager out there in some ways can be looked at as a consultant because they're dealing with processes and people all over the place. There's just two of us. We've got a large team. Today there was an audit that took place. We weren't at the audit. You know, there were three of our top qualified personnel, you know, hosted that audit. USDA organic audit. And so, you know, we're a quick teach. We learned back then with one, and we've applied, you know, what we learned to everybody that we introduce now to our team, at least from a managerial standpoint, making sure that they're the right person for this company today, because they're not just dealing with us, they're dealing with a lot of our people.
Yeah, I think, you know, we're our own toughest critic, so I can't really say that there was some blanketed advice we wish someone had given us, you know, to help us be where we are at. Everything has been a learning process through, you know, just different areas of how we manufacture or how we maintain compliance or, you know, how we invest in our people. You know, it's there's always a learning curve, and we kind of, you know, put it on ourselves to make those decisions, and don't really pin a bad decision on anybody, or pin the lack of knowledge on wishing someone had told us something.
Yeah.
We kind of look to ourselves and say, okay, you know, all right, we had a misstep, you know, what do we do to get there, you know, and kind of really drive forward, and don't, you know, I guess, you know, stay too long feeling bad about, you know, okay, wish we had made a better decision. We just really plod forward and rely on the people now that we surround ourselves with to make good decisions. And we don't fault them if they don't, because we really believe in this business, everything is a learning experience, and there's going to be some curveballs once in a while. And we all kind of team together and develop a new process that meets the standard. We do.
So supplements are a huge industry in the billions, if not trillions
Yes.
of dollars. What do you see? I mean, there's been so much growth and regulation. What do you see for the future, and specifically, do you see AI impacting your business, and have you given any consideration, or is there anything happening in your industry relative to new technology or AI?
We, our particular business is what we call a semi-automatic manufacturing. We rely heavily on still that human element. You know, there has to be someone there to do the setup and to, you know, touch the screen and tell our machines what to do, to bring the raw materials in, to load them into the machines. And so for us, it's a very hands-on process still out there. So I don't see really where AI could step into to what we do out there yet.
Not in the
Not in the manufacturing side. Yeah.
We are seeing, though, from a marketing perspective, we're seeing the use of some of the technologies that are available today in terms of promoting the company. We've not done. Haven't felt the need to do that. We've grown quite organically through brands that we produce for, but most recently with some of the newer equipment that we put in play, we see that we have capacity openings, quite a few. So we're out marketing and developing, and you see some of that on the internet, on our website, developing new video, and we're using some of that technology, the voiceovers. We've some of the grammatical type programs that are out there to help us write some of this material that we would never have used before. In fact, I would say that we avoided putting together a video because we really had to handwrite that script. And today, you know, I can have 5 scripts written in a matter of a couple of clicks of a button, all the same information, and we do it, and we've looked at them, we've reviewed some of those scripts. We're planning, one of those scripts we're planning on using for a video, and we've written it 4 or 5 different times in about a 30-second period by just clicking a button. So we really like the technology that's out there and that's available on the marketing side, where we plan on using it initially, is something we're corralling, grasping.
Very controversial, but it's generating a lot of good discussion. Academia is very up in arms about it, not happy, and they've already actually developed technology to detect when AI has been used over natural. So a lot of people are talking about it. We're not quite sure how we figured it out. So here's a good one. If I hand you $1 million today and tell you that it's one restriction on it, you have to reinvest it in your company. What part of your business would you invest $1 million, and then on a follow-up, what would you have done with that same money, the same requirement that you have to invest it 20 years ago?
So, when we talk about, the benefit of our, all companies want to grow. All companies, I believe that there's a burning desire to grow, right? That's part of entrepreneurship. And I don't think that the complacency of I'm big enough usually really crosses the mind of somebody that's trying to build their business. And so for me, what that kind of funding would do is give us an opportunity to expand that marketing side of our business, whether that be through infomercials or hiring a sales team to go out and help develop some new brands, so that we can fill some of those capacities and grow our business. For us today, we operate on the level as a certified manufacturer of some of the biggest companies out there that are in the manufacturing business. I mean, we are right there on the same website, holding the same certification as some of the biggest contract manufacturers out there. And I'm talking about facilities that are 800,000 square feet, 1 million square feet. We are holding the exact same certification. We have the same management team. We meet the same requirements. It's truly the upper level world-class standard that we've been able to meet. The only difference is we're not really talking about it. We haven't talked about it. We haven't talked about it a lot. Now, our clients wouldn't agree with that. They'd say, no, you talked about us about it all the time. We see it every time we get an order. We see just who you are. So that's probably what I would earmark a big portion of those dollars for, is helping us to gain more of the market share. I don't want to say competitive scale us up, growth. Again, and be that large company. What would turn us from the company that we are today in a multiple of 5 times our size? It would take that infusion of gas, and that's what we would use it for.
That would be today.
Yeah.
20 years ago, we probably would have said we need more equipment. We want to keep up, we need more equipment. 20 years ago, that money would have definitely gone to more equipment, and by now that equipment would be outdated.
Yeah.
so
today's $1 million would be to renew the
yes, right. A lot of that equipment, they don't even make parts for,
Yeah.
so.
Well, we've talked about a broad range of things, from the history and the need of it to how your company grew, some of the challenges that you've gone through along the way. Certainly, it looks like there was a couple pauses there where there was some good reflection and maybe some opportunity for follow-up. Before we end today, what are some of the things maybe that we missed that you would really like us to know about your company that are important that we didn't get to answer in these questions?
I think one of the things we missed, we didn't really talk about the breadth of the things that we actually manufacture. I know, we didn't really talk about that we make tablets, we make capsules, we blend powders. So when we talk about all the processes and the decision making and the good manufacturing and current good manufacturing processes, we are really in line with, plants that are making products that are over-the-counter medications. And So, when we're constantly on the cusp of that type of manufacturing, there is a stress level and a demand to maintain um, that compliance and grow past that compliance. Be better than the compliance. Put ourselves to the standard of pharmaceutical versus dietary supplements. So we strive for that every day. It's an everyday. We compete with ourselves um, to be there. So we
Mhm.
didn't really talk about that um, in depth, but I
No.
think that's owning a business. When you work for someone else, and there's stresses when you work for someone else. You got to be there on time. You got to be there every day. You got to show. You got to beat the person in the office next to you that's doing the same thing, or but when you own a business, it's a level of stress, but it's a different level of stress because now you're focused on being there for everyone else and being the best you can be every day and then some. So
Yeah, I mean, we've covered a lot of details about the company, how it started, what we do. We talked a little bit about what we do. But I think for us, certainly, I believe this to be true for both of us, and that is when we talk about the company, we really are talking about the people that make up the company today. Certainly we didn't think when we started this, by any means did I think that we were going to have the kind of personnel that work here that really rely on this business day in and day out to feed their family. They've made this their home. It's part of their home. It's very, it's incredibly rewarding. It's something that can never be replaced. I could have never bought that. And we feel it regularly. We first employee that made 5 years, we thought, wow, well, that's kind of neat. And another employee at 5 years, and another employee at 5 years. Okay, well now we've got 10 employees that have 5 years, and we probably have 30 employees that have 5 years today. So it was impressive when they hit 10 years. So we had one that had 10 years, and we had another 10 years. Now I think we have probably have 8, 10 people that have been with us for 10 years. Now we're looking at 15 years. And I think we have one that's been with us for 17 years. So these are just when I bring somebody through the facility and I introduce them to, and they know here I am the president of the company. There's 120 something people on the floor. How do I know them by first name? They've been with me for a number of years. A lot of them have been with me longer than I've been in my home, in the home I'm in today. They've been with me that long.
some of them have moved with us when we
traveled.
moved buildings. They
Yeah, people-
relocated themselves so they could be closer to, the company, so they didn't have a far drive.
We have several people that drive 50 miles a day to get here. We're not the furthest. We
Oh.
drive a 50-minute drive to get here. They drive 50 plus miles. I have a gentleman that works in our quality department. He drives in from Lakeland.
Oh wow.
Lakeland, that's real. I mean, that has got to be one of the most difficult drives ever. People talk about driving into Tampa. That's driving into Tampa and back to the office and back into Tampa again all in one day. And that person does it each way from Lakeland here. So we provide something. We have 14 employees that have earned their U.S. citizenship while they're employed.
Oh wow, that's a great story.
So and more to come. There's several of them that are being, it's really just a matter of where they are in the line to get called, or we would have 16 or 17 employees that have become citizens of the United States. It's important to them.
Yeah.
So that's what we do here today. Yes, we build a product, and we're competitive, qualified, but we're an employer to a lot of people that look at this as their company, and it's a big family. It really is.
And it's part of the story of the American dream, the good story of it. And then it's good for the viewer to know that that's still happening. People do have a right path
Sure,
to it.
sure, because it can get tough, but we can't quit because they need us not to quit.
That's right.
And we focus on that.
Excellent. Well, Gary, Teresa, thank you so much for having me today and hosting me. My name is James Deitch. This is for the partial satisfaction of the doctorate in history for Liberty University. Today is 27 April.